All right, moving on to yields for callable bonds. So these are a little bit different. And then first thing, whenever I see callable bonds or say yield to call, YTC, is you got to ask yourself, why would a company issue a bond with a right to then take that bond back, call it back from an investor? Why would they want to do that? Well, they want to do that because if interest rates fall, they can call that bond in and then refinance that debt at hopefully a lower interest rate. I'd want to know that for my exam as well. So for a callable bond, an investor's yield will depend on whether the bond is actually called and then when it's called. So we can calculate the yield to call at every possible call date and price. Luckily for you, you're probably not going to have to do multiple yield to calls on an exam. And then yield to worst would be the lowest of these various yields to call or the yield to maturity. Now remember, the issuer of the callable bond has the right to call a bond early. That's what I mean. So if the bond is going to mature, say in 2030, they may have a call option to have that called out in say 2027 or then anytime thereafter. And they usually do it when bonds fall. And when I was a financial advisor way back when, I remember some high interest rate bonds in the 90s, 1990s. I'm dating myself a little more. And yeah, they paid some significant rates of interest, and unfortunately, they were called out, and they were actually high interest municipal bonds. So you can imagine municipal bonds interest isn't taxable. So the client wasn't very happy about that. So they're facing what we call call risk. Will that bond, in fact, be called out? All right, so what do? Take a look at an example. So here we got a 5-year semi-annual 6% bond trading at 102. So we can say, yeah, that's trading at a slight premium to par. On January the 4th, 2024, it's callable at 102. This happens to be where it's trading at now. On or after 2027. And at 101 rather, on or after 2028. Now you say, remember par, I'm just going to use 100 for our sake of discussion here. Why would our investor get a little more than par value if the bond was called? Well, our bondholder knows that they're subject to call risk, right? So they want to be compensated for that in case the bond is called. So that's why you'll see a bond that's callable, generally speaking, will offer a little incentive, a couple extra points here in case the bond is called to our investors. So we want to calculate the bond's yield to maturity, yield to first call, yield to second call, and yield to worst. We got a number of calculations we're going to look at for you. And yes, all these are testable, but you know what? These are such easy points on the exam, and you can complete the calculations, pretty fast as well. So first up, yield to maturity. If we're looking at our 5-year, now you say, whoa, where did that N of 10 come from? Well, remember our bond is paying semi-annual, so we want to back it down to semi-annual periods. So 5 times 2. Our payment is 3. Well, you said, Jim, our bond was paying 6%. Right, but semi-annual, so divide it by 2. 6 divided by 2. Our future value, once again, would have been 1,000 or 100 in our example here. And the present value, once again, enter as a negative. It's money you would actually be paying for the bond. And you will see that our yield to maturity comes up at 2.768, but for your exam, that's a semi-annual rate. So for simplicity reasons, you just want to multiply it by 2. And there's our yield to maturity, 5.54. You can see that's slightly below our coupon rate of 6%, right? Why? Because our bond is trading at a premium. Now, the yield to first call is at 102, January 1st, 2027. Now, make sure you calculate your periods right here. This is a common error. So now we have 3 years to maturity times 2. Once again, our payment of 3. And also, there's another place you can make an unforced error. Make sure you put in the correct call price in your calculator, 102. Present value is 102. When you make that calculation, you're going to get 2.941. Multiply that by 2. You can see our yield to first call is 5.88. Continuing on, our yield to second call, we got our 4 times 2. It's a year later. Our future value is going to change, right? And our value is 2.830. Multiply by 2, 5.66. And what was the worst of the 3 interest rates that we had calculated? And that you could see, was 5.54% back here on our yield to maturity. Whoops, there we go, right there. So the lowest yield that the bond is if it's held to maturity and not called, and that was 5.54%. So actually, you're hoping the bond might be called prior to maturity.